Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. We hear from more politicians who've thrown their support behind the Freedom Convoy taking place in Ottawa. The Alberta NDP is calling for an injunction to immediately end the trucker blockade taking place at the Coutts border crossing. We have the details. And February is Black History Month. Lethbridge College is celebrating with a variety of very special events.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta NDP is calling on the UCP government to apply for an immediate injunction to put an end to the trucker blockade at the Coutts border crossing. BCN's Angela Stewart heard from a trucker at the border who says he has no plans to leave anytime soon.
This blockade must stop today.
Alberta's official opposition wants the Kenney government to take immediate action and put an end to the blockade at the Coutts land border crossing once and for all.
Demanding the UCP government immediately go before the courts and seek an emergency injunction to end the blockade and reopen the highway.
Dozens of semis and vehicles have been parked down at the border for more than 72 hours, protesting the provincial and federal government's COVID-19 mandates. One trucker I spoke to says they're not leaving. In a statement to Bridge City News, organizers of the convoy say this is the time where Canadians are taking back the freedoms that belong to them.
Basically, we're isolated more than usual.
Semis and vehicles are lined up for miles down the highway, and this is heavily impacting the village of Coutts.
We'd been assured that they were not going to block any entrances, so it was a surprise when that happened. I don't know if it's intentional or not. The protesters have said, well, you can come through the barricade if you're local, we'll let you through. The protesters, I've heard some of them say, well, you have to put up with that. We've been inconvenienced for yada, 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 and it's the price of freedom. Well, pardon me, but we've been pretty free up to this point.
RCMP say that they've been trying to negotiate with the protesters and add, as of this morning, further action is being taken. A highway is considered essential infrastructure. It is unlawful to willfully obstruct, interrupt, or interfere of any essential infrastructure, and anyone who actively blocks a highway may be subject to arrest or charged under the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act of Alberta. Organizers of the convoy say so far no one has been arrested or towed away. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Now, the owner of Hills of Home Cafe in the village of Coutts says the convoy at the border has actually been helping her business as lots of people have been ordering food from her restaurant. Carolyn Dangerfield says she has been receiving support from truckers who've come in to eat.
It's been very good, yeah, but I think the big thing is that my excitement is about supporting what's happening. You know, whether it impacted my business or not, that's just very minor compared to what they're doing today.
Now, Bridge City News has just learned that some of the truckers have now left the Coutts border crossing. As this is a developing story, we'll bring you more details as they become available. Two local politicians are going head-to-head in an online feud. Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips spoke out against Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas's stance on the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, following a post from Thomas saying she supports the truckers. In a post on Facebook, Phillips says Thomas is a disgrace to her office, adding that the MP just wants the pandemic to go on. Thomas was quick to respond, saying Phillips insists on perpetuating division and hate by painting a false narrative and using vile language to attack her. In a separate lengthy post on the MLA's Facebook page, Phillips wrote, quote, "It's clear to me that the Flew Trucks clan are unable to organize a protest, so let me help," adding that the truckers protesting should rally outside of her office downtown, but then to make a stop outside of Thomas's office as well. Thomas has yet to respond. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to meet the truckers who've been opposing the COVID-19 mandates. Trudeau has so far refused to meet with protesters who've surrounded Parliament Hill and instead says Canadians are united in getting vaccinated.
Canadian manufacturers, the Federation of Independent Business, the Chamber of Commerce, the Conservative opposition, thousands of truckers for over a month have proposed solutions to the trucking shortage in Canada and the supply chain crisis, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has ignored this crisis And even worse, he calls names for people that are raising these very issues. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is simple. Will the Prime Minister move past the division and agree to meet with some of the truckers impacted by his federal regulations?
The science is very clear. The best way through this pandemic is to get people vaccinated. That's how we end the disruptions to our supply chains caused by this global pandemic. That's how we get back to the things we love to do. That's why we've been unequivocal on the need to get vaccinated. And great news, Canadians across the country stepped up. Almost 90% of Canadians are vaccinated, including almost 90% of truckers, because we know that the biggest disruption to our supply chains happens when people catch COVID.
Conservative finance critic Pierre Poilievre talked about the few bad apples whom the truckers say do not represent them at the Freedom Convoy. Both Nazi and Confederate flags have been discovered at various locations of the protest in Ottawa.
Whenever you have 5 or 10,000 people who are part of any group, you're bound to have a number who have or say unacceptable things. And they should be individually responsible for the things they say and do. But that doesn't mean we disparage the thousands of hardworking, law-abiding, and peaceful truckers who quite frankly have kept all of you alive the last 2 years by filling your grocery shelves with the food that you eat and filling your homes with the products that you rely upon.
Political reporter Brian Lilly has been following what's been unfolding at the Freedom Convoy in our nation's capital. Brian says he recently spoke with the Ottawa police chief, who told him that so far no arrests have been made and no charges have been laid at the rally.
There haven't been the arrests. There hasn't been the violence and the damage. Yeah, some idiots went into the Shepherds of Good Hope, a Christian mission in the Byward Market, and were disrespectful and taking food that was meant for the homeless. That was wrong. But we're talking about what, tens of thousands of people and, a few idiots doing that or being rude to hotel staff, those sorts of things. That's a far cry from what I've seen in past protests where windows are smashed, businesses are damaged, there's violence in the streets, and there are arrests. In this case, there just hasn't been.
Brian will also talk about the challenge Aaron O'Toole is facing when it comes to his leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. He'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. Bridge City News caught up with another Conservative MP who has thrown her support behind the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. Lambton-Kent-Middlesex MP Leanne Rood says the support the truckers have received has been incredible.
We're talking tens of thousands of people lining roadways, lining bridges in support of this. And their message is freedom. And walking around here, it felt like a Canada Day, but times 100 here. And I've been in Ottawa for many Canada Days when I worked here previous to being elected. And the unity, the hope, the patriotism, the smiles on people's faces. And the hours I walked around, I didn't see anything hateful. That doesn't mean that there's not a few bad apples in a group, but it's important to remember not to paint everybody with the same brush. There's always going to be people who are going to speak out, who are going to do despicable things, show hatred, display symbols of hatred that I totally and utterly condemn, or display acts of misconduct and deface things, or like the War Memorial issue or the defacing Terry Fox statue. I condemn all of that, but that's not what I saw here. It was unity, it was patriotism, it was people proud to be Canadian.
Supporters of the Freedom Convoy have arrived from all over Canada, including someone who came from Lethbridge, our city right here. Bradshaw Baylog spoke with Bridge City News, and he says he can't believe the support he too has seen for our truckers.
The protests are pretty unreal in our lifetime, so I just thought I'd come check them out. It's a long trip, but I mean, it's worth it. I'm not going to see this, I don't expect, in the next while, to say the least.
When you saw news on my back, what did you think?
Honestly, I was just like walking down the street and I was like, Bridge City News, that's crazy. I was just like, I'm from Lethbridge. Like, this guy can't be from Lethbridge. Sure enough, ask him, yeah, I'm from Lethbridge. It's like unreal. Like, what a small world we live in.
What do you think when you generally see the news on a topic like a hot topic like this?
Honestly, I feel like the news is generally very biased. Like, they portray the image, either they're paid to paid to portray or just an image that they want to portray, something that's going to sell, right? And at the end of the day, I'm here and I see all this stuff on social media or CBC, and it's very negative. And I'm here myself personally, and it's very calm. People are just, here just trying to show numbers, support the idea of freedom of body choice, freedom of what you inject in yourself or whatever else, just freedom of choice in general, right? And that's what the main message is. And you're seeing the media portraying it as something else like white supremacy or who even knows, but it's whatever they're doing, they're just trying to twist the narrative.
Alberta's Ministry of Health says our province's Chief Medical Health Officer has granted exemptions to COVID-19 mask rules for 14 schools. There are reports that the ministry is not identifying the schools for privacy concerns. The department says the exemptions from Dr. Dean Shaw come with conditions. A school needs to bring in an alternate COVID-19 safety plan, and physical distancing must be maintained between all staff, students, and visitors. Lethbridge City Council is looking into what it'll take to create a ward system. Council voted unanimously to have city administration provide a future report that will outline the process to determine, develop options, decide, and implement that ward system. A ward system would see the city divided into smaller geographical electoral areas, and electors would vote from a smaller list of candidates for a councillor that represents a certain ward. Council has asked administration to report back by April 30th about what's involved. During the last municipal election, close to 56% of residents voted yes to using a ward system to elect city officials. According to Stats Canada, there were over 107,000 police-reported intimate partner violence incidents in 2019, which is up from 99,000 in 2018. The Safe at Home program put on by the Rowan House Society in Claresholm is designed to be an alternative approach to serving families who are experiencing domestic abuse and violence through a unique approach.
So while Safe at Home is providing we provide a range of services and supports to the individual with individuals with a history of perpetrating abusive partners towards their intimate partner. We work collaboratively with the outreach team through Rowan House, who is actually supporting the impacted family through this process. Through Safe at Home, we provide psychosocial education sessions, either in group or individual. We provide case management. We also provide transitional housing. And that gives an opportunity for the person who has actually been impacted by the abuse to stay safe at home.
Recent reports say Alberta has the fourth highest rate of police-reported intimate partner violence amongst the provinces. The overall rate of police-reported family violence increased 13% from the previous year. Lethbridge College kicked off Black History Month on Tuesday morning with a speech from the event organizer and instructor in the School of Justice Studies at the college, Ibrahim Toure. Last year, events for the month were mostly celebrated online. Toure says it's vital to recognize Black History Month.
We celebrate this history for our youth to know that their ancestors have been here for a very long time, survived in this land, and so continue to do so, continue to excel of those that are given the opportunity to do so. So it's important that we celebrate Black History Month, not just as us coming in, new immigrant to this country, knowing that we have ancestors that, have contributed towards the development. We too can make our own contribution towards the development of our communities. So I think that's what we're trying to do here.
The Lethbridge College Students Association will be handing out meal kits of jollof rice, which is a traditional African dish, from February 14th through the 18th. The final numbers are in for the Operation Christmas Child Shoebox campaign for 2021. Over 2,300 Lethbridge residents and over 80,000 Albertans packed a shoebox with care. This is a 7% increase compared to 2020. Frank King, the News Media Relations Manager for Samaritan's Purse, made the trip down to El Salvador and said for a lot of the children, these are their first shoeboxes they've ever received.
So the fact that they would have received this from people they're probably never going to meet in a country they may have never even heard of is truly impactful and is a great way for them to understand and know that not only do people in Canada care about them, but there's a God who knows about them, who sees them, and who's doing something about their situation by offering them this hope, again, sometimes for the first time in their lives. So that's the value of having all these Canadian packed shoeboxes that we can now take and give to children in Central America and French-speaking West Africa.
Now, King adds, when it is culturally appropriate, the team also shares the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Ontario restaurants, gyms, and theaters welcome back patrons as restrictions have eased. A number of customers were happy to return to some of their favorite businesses with the hope that COVID-19 closures are finally behind them.
Personally, going to the gym every day is something that I'm used to. It's part of my routine, and it's something that makes me feel better about myself, so I'm definitely excited to be back. Before the recent lockdown, I try to go at least once a day. If not, even just kind of go outside for walks. But with the last, the weather's been really cold the last couple of days, so it's nice to I can go back inside and get back to my normal routine that I'm used to.
Yeah, snow in Toronto and snow here as well. We had another chilly and snowy day in southwestern Alberta, and this snow should be leaving us. The cooler temperatures will remain for the short term as well. Complete weather details are coming up. Well, we had around 2 centimeters of snow in Lethbridge today. Fortunately, the flurry should be coming to an end, and the mercury will be climbing later this week. Jeanette Rocher has all of the details of tonight's forecast, along with how the rest of the week is shaping up.
Tonight, we'll see a few more flurries, and the temperature is going to drop significantly to an overnight low of -27, with wind chill factors at -33 and a risk of frostbite. Wednesday, expect sunshine and a high of -16 and a risk of frostbite with the wind chill. Thursday, sunny, high of -5. Another Chinook is on the way, and we'll see some swings in temperatures by Friday with a high of +7 and sunshine. Saturday, sunny and 6 degrees, and it's back up to double digits this weekend with a high of 12 on Sunday and then a high of 11 on Monday. The average high for this time of year is 0, and the average low is -12. The record high for this day was back in 1992 when it was 17 degrees. The record low was -38, set in 1996. The sun rose this morning at 8:04 and sunset is at 5:26 p.m., giving us 9 hours and 22 minutes of daylight today. Looking at the highs across the nation, on the west coast in Victoria, wet snow mixed with rain beginning in the morning, then changing to rain near noon, high +4, and 2 to 4 centimeters of snowfall mixed with rain in Vancouver and a high of 2 degrees. Both Edmonton and Calgary will see sunshine and a risk of frostbite with the wind chill, -18 the high in Edmonton and -17 the high in Calgary. In the rest of the prairies, Saskatoon will see sunshine and a high of -23, but wind chill will make it feel like -41 with frostbite in minutes. In Regina, sunshine and a high of -24 and a risk of frostbite. In Winnipeg, the blizzard warning will have ended by Wednesday with sunshine and a high of -20. In central Canada, Toronto will see 5 centimeters of snow mixed with rain, high of 2 degrees, falling to 0 by the afternoon. In Ottawa, 2 to 4 centimeters of snow will fall beginning near noon with a high of 1 degree. In Atlantic Canada, Fredericton will see a 30% chance of flurries and showers with a high of 1. In Halifax, also a high of 1 with a mix of sun and cloud, and a high of 0 in Charlottetown with a mix of sun and cloud, while St. John's, Newfoundland will see a high of -3 with skies clearing in the morning.
Stats Canada says the Canadian economy grew by 0.6% in November. That is 6 straight months of expansion. The agency says its initial estimate for December suggests real GDP was unchanged for the final month of the year to bring growth to 4.9% for all of 2021. Some economists say they expect the economy will contract in January under the weight of the Omicron variant. They do say, however, that the strong November results mean fourth quarter growth will likely surpass the Bank of Canada's forecast, leaving it on track to hike interest rates beginning in March. Imperial Oil is raising its dividend by 26% as it reported a fourth quarter profit of $813 million. That compares with a net loss of $1.15 billion in the same quarter a year earlier. The Calgary-based oil company says total revenue and other income more than doubled to $12.3 billion. It also says its quarterly dividend to shareholders will jump from 27 to 34 cents a share. Thousands of Albertans rely on the Old Man Watershed not just for drinking water, but also for our agricultural industries. Shannon Frank is with the Old Man Watershed Council, a group which protects our water supply. She says the Old Man Watershed is huge and impacts not just Albertans.
It does flow quite far all through Alberta and southern Alberta, and then into Saskatchewan, Lake Winnipeg, and then out to Hudson's Bay. So a large area is impacted, and we are at the top, we're at the headwaters. So, we do have a bit of an extra responsibility to maintain the health and function so that everybody downstream benefits.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Shannon Frank and myself coming up after business news. Canadian rock icon Neil Young's protest against Spotify over podcaster Joe Rogan is rocking the world's most popular streaming service. Young asked Spotify to remove his music from its platform after Rogan hosted a conversation with a doctor banned from Twitter for allegedly spreading misinformation. Canadian folk legend Joni Mitchell followed suit. Music streaming is a big part of Spotify's business, but is placing more emphasis on becoming a big podcast platform as well. Rogan has since apologized and said he will try to be more balanced with his guests. Spotify says it will put a new policy in place to direct listeners to accurate medical information when COVID-19 is discussed. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 221 points on the day to 21,319. The Dow was up 273 points to 35,405. The S&P 500 was up 30 points to 4546. And the Nasdaq was up 106 on the day to 14,346. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 19 cents to 88.34 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 12 cents to 4.75 US. Gold was down 14 cents to 18.0105 US an ounce. And silver was even on the day at 22.65 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.05 per bushel. Barley's at $9.47. Canola's at $23.24, and corn is at $10.85 per bushel. Live cattle were up 73 cents to $140.30. Feeder cattle were up 68 cents to $163.70, and lean hogs were down 33 cents to $88.15. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 78.83 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta RCMPs say the Coots border crossing blockade was no longer lawful, and resources are in place to make arrests and tow away any vehicles if they're unable to resolve the conflict. Now, this is a developing story, and we'll have more information for you as it becomes available. No less than 35 Conservative MPs have called for a leadership review of Tory leader Aaron O'Toole. Political reporter Brian Lilley will have details shortly and discuss that what it not only means for O'Toole, but for the party as well.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Join the Helen Schiller Nature Center staff for a fun introduction to winter survival and test your skills through a series of team challenges. Taking place Saturday, February 5th from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m., this workshop will teach you valuable skills that you can use on your next winter adventure. Cost is $10 per person and is open for those 16 and up. The workshop takes place outside, so come prepared and dress for the weather. For details and to sign up, visit leisure.lethbridge.ca. The Southern Alberta Art Gallery is offering visitors guided tours of their current exhibitions 3 times each week. Enjoy an enriched cultural experience as you learn more about the works of art and the artist's inspiration for their pieces. These tours are included with the cost of admission. No advance booking required. For times and more information, call SAG at 403-327-8770. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Federal Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole is facing a serious challenge over his leadership, with 35 Tory MPs calling for him to step down as leader. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter Brian Lilley, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, explain what has led us to this point where so many MPs are calling for a new leader within the Tory party.
Well, that's the $64,000 question right now, is how did it go from just being people who were Andrew Scheer loyalists, and there was always a group of people who were loyal to the former Conservative leader. I've always been told Andrew Scheer himself was not part of this, but it was a small group. Shannon Stubbs, Chris Workington, Mark Strahl, who were very upset that O'Toole didn't suffer the same fate as Scheer did. And, you look at their public pronouncements, their social media posts, they have been trying to undermine the leader. And so it's been widely known that this group was against them. And then there were others who didn't like the leader, but it didn't get to the magic number, which is 24. You need at least 24 to call for a leadership review, given the current size of the caucus. It's got to be at least 20% of the Conservative caucus calls for this. They couldn't get to that, but somehow they went from around 15 to 20. It depended on the day and how, dedicated to the cause of deposing O'Toole people were. Went from around 15 to 20 to suddenly 35. So what was it that took people from here to there? Was it his handling of the trucker protest? I know that there are people on both sides of that issue who are annoyed that O'Toole said, no, I won't meet with them. Then he said he would. Then he also denounced them. Then he did meet with some people, but it was very quiet. And so, he ends up annoying both sides while trying to play the middle. And so that's the question. How did he go from 24 to 35? And then where does it go from here?
I'm glad you brought that up because I know a lot of social conservatives I've spoken with as well. They're having an issue with some of the flip-flop, like he changes his mind all the time, including the federal carbon tax. That didn't sit well with a lot of Canadians, period. A lot of conservatives from coast to coast to coast. Now, Brian, what's the actual process the Tories go through now? Is it the party membership that decides or MPs?
It's going to be MPs who will decide, which is to O'Toole's detriment, because I think that if he had gone with an early leadership review and said to the membership, hey, I know that we're not scheduled to do this until August 2023, but let's go early. Let's put this issue to rest. Either I'm leader or I'm not. I think he could have mounted a campaign. He could have organized. And O'Toole has shown that he has skills in organizing. He, first time he ran for the leadership in 2017, he went from people not knowing who he was. I've told the story often, his press secretary getting calls saying, when is she available for an interview? Because they didn't know who Erin O'Toole was. So they thought Erin was a woman. And then he finished third in that race. In this last race, Peter MacKay was the juggernaut. Erin O'Toole beat him. He surprised a lot of people. So he's shown that he can organize campaigns. If he had gone to the membership, I think he'd be in good shape of saving his leadership. A caucus vote is something different. And with this process, where at least 20% of the caucus, and it's about just shy of 30% of the caucus, has signed a letter saying it's time for a leadership review, well, then it goes to the Conservative elected MPs. I'm not sure the senators get a vote in this, but definitely the Conservative elected MPs. And so they'll vote, does O'Toole stay or does he go? That could happen as early as Wednesday morning. If they vote 50% plus one that he's going to go, then he is out as leader immediately. And that very day, they will set an interim leader in place and then start the process of a leadership campaign. So it's caucus that's going to decide this. And that is a much more precarious position for O'Toole, because even if he ekes out a win of 50% plus one for him, that's a bad position for him to be in. 50% plus one vote against him, he's gone. But can he really stay on if it's 50% plus one, say that he should stay? I'm not quite so sure.
So, Brian, let me ask you, where do you anticipate the vote may land?
Well, right now, the momentum is with the people who are challenging O'Toole. As I said, if it had gone to the membership, it'd be very different. But they've gone from, they couldn't get above 24. This letter is not the first attempt that people have made to try and say we need to oust Erin O'Toole. It's the first time they've gotten enough signatures, and they far exceeded the number. So if you're sitting on the fence, because there are people who are definitely against O'Toole and people who are definitely for him, and then there's people who neither here nor there, I could go one way or the other. Where do they go? Do they start saying the momentum is with the challengers and I'm going to go with them? Or do they look around and say, whatever I may think of the leader, there's no plan in place to replace him, and there's no definite successor in waiting, so I'll stay with him? Those are the questions that they're going to be asking themselves as they go into the vote. At this point, I'd have to say it's tipping towards the challengers, but a lot of things can happen between now and when the vote actually comes down. Both sides, by the way, for all your viewers, I know some viewers are going to be saying, oh, but they've already said they've got 63 votes. We don't know that. Some people are saying the challengers have 63 votes. That's more than half of 119. But you speak to O'Toole's people, last week they were telling me they had 80 votes. Now they're telling me 70. So, somebody's counting somebody twice, or several people twice. We'll have to wait and see when the vote happens.
Now, Brian, let's talk about potential successors. How about somebody like Pierre Poilievre, finance critic, or even our former mayor here, Chris Spearman here in Lethbridge, says they should really consider somebody like Lisa Raitt or even Rona Ambrose.
I was a big supporter of Rona Ambrose replacing Stephen Harper, and I remember being on the radio in Ottawa, doing a monologue saying that Rona Ambrose should not put her hat in to be the interim leader, that she would have been a good face to replace Stephen Harper. Still very much in the conservative, inside the conservative tent, a younger generation, a woman who is competent in speaking. That didn't happen. Lisa Raitt, I'm not sure. Whether she wants to get back into politics. I'm not sure Rona Ambrose wants to get back into politics. Both of them are having successful careers and personal lives at the moment. Pierre Poilievre, I'm not sure. I've tried to reach out to Pierre. We do talk from time to time. We've known each other for about 20 years. And this is one of the times where he's going quiet. He was about to enter the race the last time round and pulled out the night before. So, will he consider it again? I don't know. Some people who've talked to him believe that he won't run this time and that he just wants to be kingmaker. He's very effective in the House, but as past politicians have shown, being effective as an opposition critic doesn't always translate well into being minister or even prime minister.
Brian, all of this, of course, is taking place against the backdrop of the trucker convoy, the protest in Ottawa. Now, asked whether he would meet with the protesters, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who's isolating with COVID right now, called the truckers conspiracy theorists with tinfoil hats. That's a little disrespectful. Now, Trudeau has met with past leaders of protests, but he's not meeting with the truckers. What's going on?
Well, they're conspiracy theorists with tinfoil hats, and they're racists, and they're misogynists, and they're everything else that Justin Trudeau's called them. Look, he made his mind up before he even spoke to anybody or heard from anybody. He has used the trucker convoy as a political tool, a wedge issue to, beat up on the Conservatives, and it's been effective for him for the most part. So he was never going to meet with them, but he did make it quite plain when he was asked. And I thought there were some good questions at his news conference. Other times, I think people could have gone harder on him, but there were some good questions, including why aren't you meeting with them? Is there anything that they could say to you? Things like that. And he made it clear he meets with protests and organizers that he agrees with and not those he disagrees with. Now, let's be clear. Part of the trucker convoy protest is behind a memorandum of understanding from a group called Canada Unity that says they want to replace the government. And they launched a petition that says Justin Trudeau has to be deposed and forbidden from running again. So, on that front, I can kind of see, well, why would you go meet them? They want to overthrow you, but he was never going to meet with them in the first place. And that rhetoric did nothing to calm the situation. It just fanned the flames. It poured gasoline on the flames, quite frankly.
Now, Brian, last week when we talked about the Freedom Convoy 2022 in Ottawa, you said it was right for O'Toole to be cautious until he really knew who would show up. Well, thousands of people did show up. So why won't O'Toole hold a media veil and meet with some of the protesters and the organizers with this convoy?
Well, he did meet with some of them on the way up. He went out and he met with them on Friday. Right now, he's got bigger issues. He's got to fight for his leadership, and that's the only thing that he's going to be doing. I don't expect that he's going to hold a media availability with himself or with anyone else, because all the questions would be about his leadership, and what he has to focus on is winning people over to his leadership, not giving them reasons not to go. I said that O'Toole had to be careful because you need to know who's going to show up. And if all of a sudden the organizers showed up on Parliament Hill and there were, photos of Justin Trudeau hanging in effigy or calls to kill the prime minister, you can't meet with somebody like that. Most of the protesters were, overwhelming majority were exactly what you wanted to protest. They were respectful. They voiced their views. You can agree or disagree with their views, but they did it. But there was a small enough minority to lead to all kinds of media stories, to allow Justin Trudeau to point to small things and say, this is all of them. And, whether you agree with those media stories or that portrayal or not, this is politics. This is a blood sport. And they got ammunition, the Liberals did, over the weekend because of some idiot showing up with flags or saying the things or doing things that it allowed them to portray this, and anyone associated with them, as wrong. Michael Cooper is being vilified for doing an interview where somebody walked behind him with a Canadian flag that had a Nazi symbol drawn on top of it. Michael Cooper had nothing to do with that. But, is it fair? Absolutely not. But this is politics.
So, Brian, let me ask you something. Have any charges or arrests been made on the Hill in regards to the trucker convoy?
As of a news conference held late Monday by Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly, no. Yeah, look, I've been to big protests on the Hill where there have been all kinds of arrests, and it hasn't resulted in the kinds of denunciations that we've seen. So, I think that city officials in Ottawa are clutching at pearls a bit. I do understand why they think, all right, it's time to move on and let the city get back to normal. But there haven't been the arrests. There hasn't been the violence and the damage. Yeah, some idiots went into the Shepherds of Good Hope, a Christian mission in the Byward Market, and were disrespectful and taking food that was meant for the homeless. That was wrong. But we're talking about what, tens of thousands of people, and a few idiots doing that or being rude to hotel staff, those sorts of things. That's a far cry from what I've seen in past protests, where windows are smashed, businesses are damaged. There's violence in the streets, and there are arrests. In this case, there just hasn't been.
Now, it appears as though many of the participants of the Freedom Convoy have left Ottawa, but others, Brian, say they're sticking around and blocking the streets of our nation's capital until all of the mandates are lifted. Now, you think this may be a mistake?
Look, in politics, your job is to convince people that you've got the right ideas, the right policies, the right views. And part of doing that is getting people to come to your side. You're not going to get the citizens of Ottawa to come to your side if you are making it so that they can't go downtown, so that if you are living in the downtown area, which many people do, and you're hearing horns go all night and diesel fumes spewed outside, you can take that for a couple of days. But these guys say they're going to stick around and keep honking and keep running their trucks until all the mandates are lifted. The Trudeau government is not going to lift the mandates. I'm sorry. They've made it clear they see this as a political winner for them. Fighting with this group of protesters does well for their base. They're not going to change the policy. So what are the remaining protesters doing? They're annoying the citizens of Ottawa. They're going to end up annoying the media that cover them, who will continue to do bad stories. And at a certain point, that sinks into the general population, and you're not going to win things over. There's a poll out showing 54% of Canadians want COVID restrictions lifted, and about a third of Canadians back the trucker protest. Do you want that going down, or do you want it going up? If you're trying to be smart about politics, you want that going up. And what they're doing in continuing this on isn't going to help that, especially with the behavior, because the people that are sticking around are some of the ones that were involved in belligerent behavior before, and now you continue to be belligerent instead of just protest. Well, that's going to turn people off. That's not how you win in politics.
Brian, Quebec had promised to bring in an anti-vax tax, but Premier François Legault is reportedly walking away from that now. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they spin this. They had brought it up, I think, January 11th or so, around there. So just about 3 weeks ago, they said, oh, we're going to bring in this tax. It'll be they actually didn't call it a tax. They called it a health contribution. That would be incredibly problematic because it would effectively be a health tax, but only for the unvaccinated. Well, that would go against the Canada Health Act. And then if you made it a tax based on your medical decisions, well, that could be unconstitutional. So there were all kinds of legal problems around this, but there was a large amount of public support in various parts of the country, as we've talked about from different public opinion polls on this. But now they're walking away from it. How and why? Well, I think the how is they're just going to quietly not implement it after saying they would, and they're going to claim that it was a success. If you remember all the stories that in the days after, they said 7,000 people had signed up for first vaccination appointments after that. Well, let's compare numbers a little bit. I've been following the first vaccination numbers for Quebec and Ontario, the two biggest provinces. There are days where Quebec's getting 2, 3, 4,000 people a day. That includes people 5 to 11, the kids that have just become eligible. Ontario, without this sort of threat or policy, they've been doing 9, 10, 11, 12,000 a day of first vaccinations. I know Ontario is a larger population, 14.7 to about 8.5 million, but even proportionately, it's different. One's doing it with the threat of a tax. The other's doing it by saying, going in and trying to convince people and doing community outreach. So it wasn't the success that they're going to claim it will be, but it will be called a success by much of the media and those who want ever growing restrictions.
Brian Lilly is a columnist with the Toronto Sun and one of our regular contributors. Brian, thanks so much for your time again today.
Thank you, Hal.
The Alberta Rockies feed the headwaters of various rivers, including the Old Man, Crow's Nest, and Castle rivers. Many of us living here in southern Alberta see a lot of these waters, if not every day, then often during our weekend excursions to the mountains and foothills. The watershed is vital for life in our region, not only supplying drinking water, but also water needed to feed our livestock and crops. Now, there's a group working to protect these waters called the Old Man Watershed Council. Shannon Frank is with the council and joins us today here in Lethbridge. Shannon, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much.
Now, so many of us here in southern Alberta enjoy the waters flowing from the Rockies on our weekends and exploring, but many of us also don't realize that groups like yours look out for the quality of this local watershed. Can you explain?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. So the Old Man Watershed Council is a registered charity and nonprofit based in Lethbridge, and we're a collaborative forum working with everybody in the watershed. So we have 19 sectors on our board, and it's all about working together to protect the watershed and make sure that it's healthy enough to support our industries and our communities so that we can enjoy the benefits now, but also for future generations. So as a nonprofit, we do a lot of work with all levels of government, our First Nations communities, our cities, our towns, and basically everyone, no matter who you are, you have a role to play. And our goal is to really engage people from all walks of life so that our whole community is committed to protecting watershed health.
So Shannon, can you really educate us as to what a watershed is and why it's so important?
A watershed is an area of land that all drains into a common water body. So in this case, the Old Man River. But it can be at a smaller scale, like the Crow's Nest River watershed, or it can be at a larger scale, like the Hudson Bay watershed that we are a part of, because our river flows east through the prairies to Lake Winnipeg and into Hudson's Bay. So everything that's happening on that land actually impacts the nearby creeks and rivers and lakes, and it all comes together. And so that's the idea of the watershed is a part of all of that land and all of the people on that land. So we all have to work collaboratively to protect it.
Now, when you actually look at a map, the watershed can look a little similar to the circulatory system of the human body. Do you think that's kind of a good comparison?
Yeah, for sure. Like in our bodies, everything's working together to keep us healthy. Similarly with the watershed, we have to work together, and our rivers and our lakes and our creeks work together to maintain ecological function and habitat and filtering water and that sort of thing, so that everything is definitely connected. And that's why it's so important that us as humans are doing our part to support the natural ecosystems and the fish and the wildlife and the trees, because we are all connected and we depend on each other to have this function so that we can enjoy the benefits of that, like clean water, clean air, and healthy, abundant wildlife, and so on.
So like a human body, a watershed could become sick or even misaligned?
Yeah, exactly. We've seen instances of this where there could be a spill or too much pollution or, too much land disturbance, and a watershed can become unhealthy. And we can do assessments to see what the health is. So we have indicators in science that we use to assess. In our last report was in 2010, was a very large scale state of the watershed report. We gave ratings of good, fair, and poor to each major section of the watershed: the prairies, the mountains, the foothills, and the southern tributaries. And we find there is a range. Some areas are healthier than others, and some really need our attention.
Now, the Old Man Watershed, Shannon, may start in the mountains west of Lethbridge, but how far east feels the impact of this watershed?
Well, it meets up with the Bow River at the forks just outside Grassy Lake, and from there becomes the South Saskatchewan River. So, it does flow quite far, all through Alberta and southern Alberta, and then into Saskatchewan, Lake Winnipeg, and then out to Hudson's Bay. So a large area is impacted, and we are at the top, we're at the headwaters. So, we do have a bit of an extra responsibility to maintain the health and function so that everybody downstream benefits and can enjoy those same necessities that we rely on. So as more creeks and rivers flow in, our impact might be diluted a little bit along the way by other water coming in, but we certainly are at the headwaters, which are the most important source for Western Canada.
It sounds like the lives of millions of people depend on this water that flows through many parts of Alberta. Let's talk about more specifically who relies on the watershed.
Of course. So we all do, right? Like our cities and towns withdraw our drinking water from nearby creeks and rivers. And then we put back our wastewater into those same creeks and rivers. So, we're literally using it day in and day out. And then our whole, like a large portion of our economy in Southwest Alberta is dependent on agriculture, and specifically irrigated agriculture, where we need that water to grow the crops and feed the livestock that, is benefiting our jobs and our economy. So without that, we would have much less jobs and less people would be able to live here, because the industry would just be a lot smaller without irrigation. And in times of drought, like we saw this year, I guess last year now in 2021, the drought was very severe for dryland farmers who didn't have irrigation. It's very tough to be a dryland farmer, and we need that water. And there was just an economic study that came out that showed that, billions of dollars come out of the irrigation sector every year. And then also, of course, for our environment, for our fish and our wildlife, our trees, water filtration that we get for free from our wetlands and our ecosystems, the places that we enjoy in the mountains for recreation. It's all dependent on water, and more specifically on the snowpack that we get in the mountains. It's not the rain in the summer so much, it's actually the snowpack in the mountains that we depend on. And so we're always watching, how much is there. The government measures it, they report it because it's so critical.
Let's talk about some of the coal mining in the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies. A lot of controversy there. You've even had country stars like Cor Blunt from our area and Paul Brandt getting involved, saying it's going to impact our water quality. The Old Man Watershed Council is dedicated to protecting this watershed. What are your thoughts when it comes to coal mining in the Rockies, how that impacts the water?
We are a resource for decision makers. So we provide unbiased information, scientific research, and concerns and questions that we're hearing from stakeholders. So that's what we did when the coal debate erupted. We continue to provide information about the potential impacts of coal mining. And we also shared information about some of the positive potential impacts of job creation. And so, our role is not to make judgments, and we don't take sides on large development projects. Our focus is on providing that trustworthy information and, looking at the science to see what we can learn from past research, from past projects. And then we encourage the public and our decision makers to learn from that information and come to their own conclusions. And we provided input directly to the Alberta Energy Regulator and the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada through written submissions and presentations. And so we really pointed out that there could be, significant environmental impacts from coal mining along the eastern slopes. And we also mentioned, that there can be economic benefits. So we really try to be a forum for discussion and debate. And similar with any other large project, there's going to be opinions on all sides, and we encourage that discussion based on fact and science.
Now, collaborative projects are an important part of what your council does. Let's talk about some of those collaborations.
For sure. So we work with everybody, and it's all about, trying to encourage everybody to kind of step up and do a little bit more for the benefit of the watershed and the future generations that will be depending on it. So we have a large project in the headwaters where we work directly with backcountry recreationists to adopt good practices, steer clear of water, not driving through the creeks when they're recreating, picking up garbage, leave no trace principles, that sort of thing. And then we also do a lot of restoration projects. So planting willows to reinforce stream banks, planting trees and shrubs to, bring back the vegetation in a damaged area so that it can function again. We also have partnerships with our Indigenous communities to do similar work of restoration and engaging communities. Also with farmers and ranchers, we support stewardship projects on private land. A lot of what we do is provide funding for riparian fencing and off-stream watering units so that cattle is kept out of the water, and it also benefits the operation. It means they're not, in a wet area, and they have better weight gain. So, no matter who you are, if you're urban, if you're rural, if you're recreating, there's always something you can do. And so our job is to support those good practices and help people make the good choices and make it easy for them, maybe with some funding or resources.
Do beavers have much of an impact in the Old Man Watershed area?
Yes, beavers are a bit controversial sometimes, but they are a very important part of the ecosystem for holding back water on the land, especially during floods. Those natural beaver dams that they build help us during drought so that there's more water retention on the land, especially wetlands that are connected to groundwater. And they also hold back water in times of flood, so they're very important.
How does the Old Man Watershed Council interact with recreation groups?
We worked collaboratively to educate recreationists, so like attending races and events, talking to them about good practices, things they can do when they're out on the land. I mentioned a few like steer clear of water, and we also promote, putting out your fires. There's a lot of things that recreationists can inadvertently do when they're out there. We don't realize how much impact we have sometimes because we think we're just one person, but we're actually one of thousands that are doing the same thing. So our impact adds up. So we ask people to stay on designated trails, not go through the water, and basically leave no trace.
One more question for you. What about the impact of the watershed on agriculture? Let's talk a bit about that.
Well, the watershed supports agriculture, of course. The soil that is growing the crops and feeding the cattle is critical. We, wouldn't exist without that good soil that we have. And then the water that's feeding the livestock and watering the crops. And it's also, feeding our processing industry. A lot of what we have here is based on the processing side, and we need water for that too. So it's all connected, and we all can do our part to do a little bit more, step up a little bit, to make sure the watershed health is protected.
Shannon Frank is with the Man Watershed Council. Shannon, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.